You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
PackersTalk.com.
Welcome to the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. I'm your host, Miles Teddick, joined by your co-host, Tim Hamilton. We are diehard Packers fans. We just love talking about the Pack. We're not getting into national sports media talking points and all the nonsense that they get into. We're sticking to real football. We're diving into the top topics around the Pack every week, breaking down the games during the season and sorting through all the drama and the rumors of the offseason. If y'all want to support the podcast, please spike that like button for us. Give us a follow on all the socials and subscribe to that Packers Talk YouTube channel. All these things help us out quite a bit, make a big difference, and don't take too much from you. So we greatly appreciate y'all, all the listeners and subscribers. And before we get started, a few words from our sponsor, Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packers fans, and we are talking about the schedule today, so this is very appropriate. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. For direct links to specific Packers game tickets, go to packerstalk.com/tickets or browse their website at theticketking.com. Jump in there and check those out. As we're talking about some of these games, if you get excited about any one in particular, better jump on it now. So, Tim, good evening, sir. How you doing?
Good evening, Miles. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Doing pretty good. I got to say, my early feelings about the schedule are positive. I'm particularly excited about one piece of the schedule, but overall, what do you think, man?
I really have no complaints. It's the first time in as long as I can remember where I looked at a schedule and really couldn't come up with anything like to complain about. I mean, it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be exactly how we would draw it up. But, I mean, I think it sets up really nice for the Packers. Starting off in Brazil, we'll get that game, not to get the game out of the way, but to get the travel out of the way, and then they come home week 2. I love having a midseason bye like they do in week 10. And, breaks up the schedule in the middle of the season, which is great. And then coming down the stretch, you're playing a lot of primetime games. You're playing divisional games at the end of the year. Even when they have, West Coast travel, they travel out to Seattle for a Sunday night game. But before that, they play Thursday. So they're rested going into that game. And after coming home from Seattle, they get an extra day before their next game because they play on a Monday night against the Saints. So, yeah, it's a schedule that I really can't complain about. There's some cool games. Thanksgiving night at Lambeau against the Dolphins. I mean, let's hope it works out better than the last time they played Thanksgiving night at Lambeau.
No
we won't
doubt.
talk about that, but yeah, I mean that's a cool game. That's that should be a lot of fun. And hopefully it's nice and cold because the Dolphins, as we saw last season, don't play very well when it's cold. So that'll slow them down a little bit.
Man. Fish don't like cold water, man. Fish sit still in cold water.
The fish don't like to freeze. and they finish Minnesota at home and at Minnesota and then Chicago at home for the second straight year, which is kind of a interesting little wrinkle there. But yeah, it's exciting. I can't complain a lot, and I know there's a lot of Packer season ticket holders that are liking the noon starts early in the year more than we were expecting them to get. So there's a bunch of noon starts the first half of the year, which is great. So yeah, I mean, overall, I think it's favorable to the Packers, and there's not much to complain about, at least on my end. I don't know. What about you? Are you upset about anything? Is there something there that you don't like?
I got no complaints, man. I'll say, looking at it, there's definitely a stretch that stands out to me that I'll talk about in a second. But, I love starting the season in Brazil against the Eagles. I've said multiple times what happened last time the Packers opened the season on the road against the Eagles. I like getting the Colts early. I like getting the Titans early. I like getting the Vikings early. I like how the schedule develops. You don't see Houston until you've gotten a few games under your belt. Worked out a few wrinkles and a few issues, I'm sure, by that point. But Yeah, like you said, buy in the middle of the season, and then in the second half of the season is tough, but from a fan's perspective, I don't think you could ask for much more, man. Like this
Yeah.
is going to be a fun stretch after the bye week. So yeah, I'm very very optimistic, very excited about how the schedule looks right now, and obviously things change as soon as the games start getting played. You think somebody's good and they're not. You think somebody's bad and they're good. But the thing that's gotten me the most excited about this schedule here is 4 primetime games in a row. And not just 4 primetime games in a row, just anywhere on the schedule, man. At the end of the season, right there at the end of November, beginning of December, we just get nonstop primetime Packers. And I really, really, really love that. So very excited overall. Want to jump in. We got a couple of comments already jumping in with us. Chris in. What's up, sir? Happy to see you joining us this evening. It says, what's up, fellas? Best Packers show out there. You got to tell some more people that, man. Got to tell some more people that.
Spread the word.
Appreciate you. Appreciate the love. And our friend R. Showers jumping in. The schedule is well designed, but difficult opponents. Very true. I don't see any of the teams who were good last year having a big drop-off except maybe Rams, Dolphins. Yeah, I think that's what I was kind of just alluding to is you never know who might show up and who might not. There's always a few surprises about who's good and who's maybe not as good as you might thought. So I think overall it looks tough from an early perspective, but not brutal. I don't look at it and go, oh man, this is gonna be a really tough schedule. I mean,
No.
you need a tough schedule. If your eyes are on the Super Bowl, stack the schedule, man. You might as well. Our friend Clint Stoner, good to see you. Bears early would have been better this year, but I don't think it's going to matter. Nah, it doesn't matter. We get to finish with the Bears. We get to nail the coffin with the Bears in that week 18 matchup. And we actually might get that in prime time too. That's TBD. We don't get to know what that is yet. So, overall I'm very excited about the schedule. So, all right, let's jump in. I mean, we're not going to make predictions, but I mean, does the schedule now that it's out make you feel any different about, what you think about this season?
Not really. I mean, you have to play tough teams. It's not an easy schedule,
Right.
but I mean, you got to play these teams. Like they're on your schedule. You're going to play tough teams. You're going to play bad teams. You can't get 17 games of the Panthers. So
Right.
you got to face it. And if they're spread out, that helps, I guess, a little more. But we sit here in May and we think certain teams are going to be good and certain teams are going to stink. By the time you get to those games in September, October, November, that could totally flip. What you think is a tough game now, maybe some of those teams aren't as good.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? It happens every year. You see that with a handful of teams every year who you're expecting them to be playoff teams and they fail to make the playoffs. And there's always teams that weren't playoff teams the previous year that all of a sudden now are. So it's so hard to predict when they haven't played any games yet. Like you can look at it now, but it's going to be totally different once you get to the season. And then there's also the fact sometimes it just matters when you play these teams too. It's like,
Yeah.
How injured are they? Either the Packers or the opponent that you're playing. Like, how many injuries are they dealing with when you get them? That is going to significantly impact the game. And are they coming off of rest or no rest when they play the Packers? That's going to affect it. Like, what's their stretch of games going into the Packers games? Like, there's so many different factors that go into it.
Yeah.
So, no, I don't think seeing the schedule, it made me say, well, they're, before that they're a 10-win team and now they're a 12 or 13-win team. And I don't think I could look at it and be like, well, they were a 12-win team, but now I see the schedule and they're only going to win 8 games. Like,
Yeah, right.
it doesn't affect me at all as far as what their schedule is. The fact that it broke pretty well and favorably, I think, for the Packers just kind of makes me feel good about it. It doesn't really change any of my, hopes for the season with them, which is great, which is, I hope we all feel that way.
Yeah.
Let's be optimistic. So, but I want to see the team first. And that's going to set my expectations. Like what's this team going to look like through the off season here in OTAs, mini camp, into training camp. and then the schedule's kind of, secondary because it does matter who you're playing and when you're playing them. But this far out, it doesn't really change any expectations for the season for me.
Do you have like a toughest game already pegged?
That's a good question. I think the Eagles game's going to be tough to start the season.
True. Yep.
But I also think you might get them at a good time too because they have 2 new coordinators. So there's a lot of unknown from a Packers preparation standpoint. But it's also like they're not going to be hitting their stride right away with 2 new coordinators.
Right.
I think that's a tough one. Obviously, we've had our problems with the 49ers. That's not going to be easy. At least we get them at Lambeau. So, those 2 stick out, and the Lions games, both Lions games, because I think my feeling, at least right now, and this is, again, we're in May, but I think the Lions are going to be really good, just like they were last year. I think it's them and the Packers in the NFC North as the 2 best teams, pretty significantly ahead of the other 2 teams. So those 2 Lions games really stick out to me. And then I think there'll be a team like they're playing the AFC South this year. One of those teams is going to be pretty good. Everybody thinks it's going to be Houston based off of last season, and it very well might be. But it could be Jacksonville too. I don't expect much from Tennessee. Maybe it's the Colts. But I think one of those games will be tougher than we're expecting right now because I think one of those teams will be, better. They're going to, Jacksonville, the Colts will take kind of a step forward from what they were last year. But yeah, I know I threw a bunch of teams at you there, but to me, it's the Eagles game, the Niners game, and the Detroit games are the tough ones that those are the ones I kind of look at and be like, all right, we're going to find out a lot about the Packers when they get through those games.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's hard to not say the Niners game. I mean, that's an obvious one. You got to beat the Niners. Definitely got to beat the Niners at Lambeau. But yeah, I mean, the Dolphins, I think that has an opportunity to be really, really tough matchup. Getting the Dolphins at Lambeau is huge that time of year. But the amount of speed that team has is just absolutely nuts. And the potential that they have is pretty scary to me. Now, just the same, you got to put it all together, and that's just as hard, as stacking the talent. You got to make the talent work. So we'll see how all that comes together. But the Dolphins definitely have my attention as far as the team that they're putting together. I think the Houston one is a really fun matchup. I don't know that scares me. I mean, it's not going to be an easy matchup by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
I wouldn't call it the hardest on the schedule.
I was surprised that's a noon kickoff too. I thought that'd be prime time.
Yeah, you would think that would be kind of a featured game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows? I haven't looked at the other games in Week 7, but if I'm looking at it, I think the Seattle game scares me a little bit just because it's at Seattle. It's late in the season. It's got potential to be a tough game. So if I had to circle, a few of them, I'd be the Niners, the Seahawks, and then the obvious ones, like you said, the Lions, all division games. But I don't see any games here. It's like, oh man, they can't win that game, And that's not calling for them to go undefeated or anything, but I just don't see a game on here that's impossible to win here. So I'm excited, man. When you see that, when you look at every match and go, they could win that, they could win that, they could win that. That's what else can you ask for as a fan? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And even some of the games, like I agree with you. There's no games on the schedule where I say they can't win that game. And doing this podcast with you last year, I think as we were going through the early part of the season, they were coming up on the back-to-back games against the Lions on Thanksgiving and then the Chiefs at Lambeau. I didn't think they could win either one of those games, and they won them both. So who knows? Right. Once you get into the season, anything's possible, and it changes a lot from where we are in May.
Oh, absolutely, no doubt about it, and that's where it's just like. From this perspective, being able to say you could win any of those games, it's about all you can ask for as a fan at this point in the season. Because I guarantee you the Bears don't feel that way. I know Adam Rank feels that way, but I don't think the Bears fans feel that way. So, if you do, respect to you, Bears fans. You guys have hung through some wild stuff, and just anyway, the Bears still suck. So there's that. Yeah, and then so jumping back over to the comments here, we got I hope our defense helps us early, being that nobody will have extensive tape on them. Keep it vanilla and brief preseason and come out raging. Yeah, I agree, man. I think that should be pretty much the plan every season, but especially when you've got a new defense going in, that it's hard to game plan for a defense you don't have tape for. I mean, they're going to be going back just like a lot of fans have on Halfley. You're going to look at previous defenses that he's put together and run and try to learn from that, and that's about all you can do until he puts something on the field. So I would be willing to bet there's probably some stuff that you won't see until the Eagles game. They'll have some fun and have a couple of tricks up their sleeve maybe for that game. But yeah, I mean, it's a progression too. You've got the defense is going to be one that I think that we have to have, kind of a tolerance for, right? Like early in the season, they're going to have mistakes, and it doesn't mean that they're not good. It doesn't mean, kind of like the offense last season. You could see it happening. We could see mistakes, but man, there were these bursts of potential. It's just like watching the Titans, like, shoot, man, that Musgrave guy, if he could just keep his feet. And you just things here and there, you see flashes of Wicks. I think you've got to be prepared for the defense to go through some of that this season, especially in the first half. You'll see flashes of, guys pulling things off and doing this right and doing that right, but it's going to take some time before they're all in position. Before you got all 11 guys really working together in unison. And actually good call here. Football isn't baseball. Meshing a ton of turnover in the NFL is difficult. League will catch up with the Dolphins' offense this year. I agree. There's a lot of speed that came into the league this year, so speed's going to be less and less of a competitive advantage. But yeah, so I would say we gotta give it some time, give the defense a chance to struggle early in the season before we light everything on fire like we do as fans. But I think it stacks up well. You've got some challenges early in the season, but it's not like you've got just an absolute gauntlet coming out. I think you got a good chance for the defense to be tested, but also to, get their feet wet before too much is asked of them. But anyway, so that's, I guess, best part of the schedule for me is that primetime stretch. I mean, is there anything else that comes to mind for you, Tim?
No, I want to agree with you what you were saying about the defense. Like, it's going to take time with them. I think they have an opportunity early to maybe surprise some teams that they don't have a background on this defense yet. So maybe, it's beneficial to them that there's no tape. There's not much you can prepare for unless you go back to Boston College, and that's might be a lot different than what they're going to play in Green Bay. So there's that benefit, but I also think it's going to take a while for the defense to gel because they're not going to be. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't expect them to all be on the same page, communication-wise and knowing what to do from day one of the regular season in Brazil. I think it's going to take time. I think it's going to take time for Halfley to figure out how best to use all of his guys. And so it's going to have to be a process where they build and build. And, I hope we don't jump to too many conclusions and start to fire Halfley, like we did with Fire Barry early in the year. Hopefully there's progress that we can see each week and it builds throughout the season. So this defense does gel and come together. Maybe it's quick, but most likely, set your reasonable expectations that it's going to take time to get the coaches and the players on the same page with this new system, and a new system from what everybody's saying. We haven't seen it yet, but from what everybody's saying is pretty significant difference from what they were playing under Joe Barry. So it's going to take time, but the talent's there. It seems like they hired some good coaches. So, just be patient with it.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to be patient with it. There's going to be a learning curve regardless of how good these guys are or how good the coaches are and all of that. It's all going to come together. But hey, the first step of that started today. OTAs kick off, right? So we got absolutely no information out of OTAs today. Nothing to say about it, but
We don't know what's going on.
no news is probably good news. It means nothing catastrophic happened. No crazy freak injuries, in non-contact situations. Sometimes the non-contact injuries are the worst ones. That's just you don't ever want to see that this time of year. OTAs kick off. What's on your radar here as we, pretty much take in any little bits of football we can possibly get our hands on?
Yeah, so I think for those listening to this in a podcast form, thank you for listening. But we're doing this Monday night, and I think Tuesday is when the media gets to see the team in the OTA practice. So we should get some little nuggets come from that. But from my perspective, I just want to make sure everybody's there and accounted for.
Yep.
There's no unexpected absences. We've heard Jair's been there throughout the offseason. We heard he actually showed up 2 weeks early, which is cool. I mean, good for him. He was in their schedule release video. So,
yep.
He's part of the team. So let's make sure he's there, and everyone else. We don't have any holdouts. I don't even know who would be holding out contract wise in this situation.
I don't think anybody.
No. And the other one thing is, let's make sure everybody's there from a physical standpoint, that there's not too many guys standing around watching. Hopefully everybody's healthy and participating. So that, to me, that's the most important. Like, everyone's there, everybody's participating. Cool. That's number one. And then as far as the actual on-field stuff, and I don't know how much of this you can even make, get too much information from at this point, but where's everybody lining up? Defensively, obviously, with the changes, who's playing the slot, who's lining up opposite Jair at outside corner, how many, which defensive linemen or edge rushers have their hands in the ground. And then offensively, it's like, how are they shuffling the offensive line? Are they moving guys all over, or certain people staying in one spot? It's more so like, where are they lining up at this point, and how much time are they spending at those positions? I don't know how much, at least early part of OTAs, that we're even going to see of like teamwork or really be able to see them positionally other than drills. But at some point through OTAs and minicamp, we will get that information. So that's what I'm focused on. Like, where are they on the field? Where are they schematically?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's not a whole lot you can take from OTAs that means anything. So that doesn't mean there's nothing that you can take, but there's just not a whole lot. So I think, where are guys lining up? What does the depth chart look like immediately? I think that kind of tells you what coaches' first impressions are of who fits where, and that there are some big-time question marks of who's going to be where on the depth chart. You can start seeing receiver DB battles that are legitimate. That's probably one of the only areas to get good measurements until pads come on. You're not going to learn much about running backs, right? You're not going to learn much about linebackers. Maybe the linebackers' ability to cover. O-line, D-line is going to be a lot of fundamental footwork, stuff like that. You're just not going to see a whole lot. But you can see the receivers and DBs go at it. You don't have to have the pads on for that to be real. So I'm kind of looking forward to see, some reports of who raises eyebrows first. Who's the first receiver to raise some eyebrows? Who's the first DB to raise some eyebrows? Those are the groups that I'm watching in OTAs to see kind of, who's taking some leadership early on. But other than that, yeah, man, I'm with you. All we can really do is see who lines up where and what do we think about that. Hopefully it's fast. One thing I said before, you got to win against air. If these guys aren't, executing assignments when they're not playing against somebody, they're not going to be good at executing assignments when they're playing against somebody.
Sure.
So, you do want to see that, right? You want to see the things that you're supposed to see. So no dropped balls, let's be fundamentally sound. Let's be crisp. Let's be fast, things like that. But otherwise, I think that something else we can take is, you can see chemistry happen, right? Who looks like they're having fun? What relationships are growing? You're going to see there's a void, obviously, with Aaron Jones. Who fills that void? I think A.J. Dillon is probably going to step into that void. I think, from an offensive perspective, the receivers can start filling that void. These guys have some years on them now. Obviously, Jordan Love is at the center of all of it. So, that's a beautiful thing. When your quarterback can be good and also a good leader, you're covering a lot of ground there. I do want to draw some attention. R jumped in the comments with us here about Christian wrong one. Where'd it go? Christian Watson's situation. Are taking the under on Christian Watson bet, saying 4 practices before the hammy issue rears its ugly head. I'm on the other side of that, man. I am on the optimistic side that says they figured out the hammy issues. And we talked about this. I had a little bit of a rant about this even. When we get a report from Rob Domofsky that says that these guys warmed up for 20 minutes, which is considerably longer than in the past. That's like give me the biggest red flag I can get. Let me just wave that thing all over the place. That is just such a massive red flag. And the comparison that I made is my amateur athlete self that just runs for, psychotic reasons. I'll go for a 5-mile run. I did yesterday, and take me about an 8-minute pace, maybe 7.5 if I'm feeling good. I warm up for 15 to 20 minutes before I do that. Dynamic warm up. Taught to me by Coach Brown. Shout out to Coach Brown again down there at UWO. That's some basic stuff, man. If these guys were not, they obviously weren't warming up for 20 minutes before, but if 20 minutes is considerably longer than what they were doing before, I guarantee you that is going to be an improvement. Guarantee you. It's really sad that something so fundamental was so overlooked with the last staff. That it's kind of embarrassing all the way around. It's like, dang, Matt LaFleur, you got players dropping and you're not going to your training staff and be like, hey, maybe we should warm up a little longer? Where was that? That's just a very basic thing to start with. So anyway, I won't go back on the same rant. We can, that's a few episodes ago. You can find that on the YouTube channel. But I do believe that they have those issues figured out. I'll again point to the fact that Christian Watson did not have much of an injury history before the last 2 seasons, where the Packers didn't warm up much before they played. But so yeah, I'm gonna take the opposite side of you there. What do you think, Tim? Or where's your meter on Christian Watson optimism?
I'm trying to be optimistic. He's not coming off a good season to be optimistic as far as injuries go, but it does seem like they're trying and maybe have, or at least they think they have a handle on what the issue's been. The new training staff, I would imagine it can only help the situation. And the fact that he's, digging in and doing the research on it and trying to attack the problem by going out and seeing specialists, it's a positive. So I'm hopeful and optimistic, but we're really not going to know until the season or training camp. And honestly, I'm kind of I'll believe it when I see it with him, but I want to be optimistic because I know how talented he is and how much of a difference he makes when he's on the field. It's been an issue for him for his 2 years in Green Bay. So I don't know at this point. I'm hopeful, but I got to see him stay on the field. And, I won't feel better about it until we're into the season. He's playing every week and available for them every week. So at this point, it's great. It's great that he's taking part in OTAs and going to hopefully make it through into training camp. That's awesome. It's good news. I think the change with the training staff and the strength staff, that's, most likely going to be an improvement, not just for him, but there are other guys dealing with soft tissue injuries throughout the team. So hopefully that can improve things. And, the fact that he, in his own time, in his off season, he's attacking the issue. He's not just, healing up and continuing to train. He's trying to figure out what's going on and seeing these doctors who, can hopefully make the improvements and make a difference for him. So I want to be optimistic for him. He's at a good stage right now, it seems like. So, let's one day one day at a time with him, and just stay healthy through the off season, and we'll see where it's at when the regular season goes. But right, I'm optimistic, I guess, is the easiest way to say it. But I'm also kind of cautious with like declaring him over it or thinking that we're going to get a full season out of Christian Watson, because we just don't know.
You don't know. Yeah, and that's fair. I will say, there's a whole lot of things that can cause that, but one thing, and this was always kind of my suspicion, you can blow a hamstring by trying too hard. You know what I mean? And I live down here in Texas, so you got to know about snakes. But if you don't know much about snakes, the poisonous ones, when they're babies, are actually more dangerous because they don't moderate how much venom they put out when they're biting something. They're just little and they're like, oh shoot, they panic and they just let it all out. I feel like there's an element of that to Christian Watson, especially in this first year when he's playing with Aaron Rodgers, where the guy is just out there trying to run literally as hard as he can and pops a hamstring. And that's where it's like, you have to learn how to moderate those things. You have to learn how, that's like the warm-up thing, like properly warm it up, and there's a dynamic process to that. It's not just sit on the ground and touch your toes. So there's a lot, I think, to the maturity side as well. The fact that he is seeking out the solutions. His dad's obviously been super outspoken on the Twitterverse or the Twixverse about the situation, and I think that that's a really good sign, right? You have a motivated individual to figure this out. We have all seen plenty of professional athletes over the years, regardless of the sport, that just kind of, on my back, I got paid and my back is sore. I'm gonna just sit this one out, right? And they just own my back for a few years, and then they drift away. And so that's where you could have that. He could be that, and he's certainly not that, right? So I think that's my first point of optimism, where it's like you got a motivated individual trying to figure it out. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. Hamstrings, that's not something that is a contact injury, right? He didn't, R made the comment about he's been glass. I've heard that Christian Watson always made of glass. That's not real accurate, though, right? Like, glass would insinuate that he breaks when he gets hit. And that's not the case. The guy's just been popping hamstrings. He's actually taken some pretty tough hits, man. He's a big dude. So I wouldn't say even that he's made of glass. I'd say you got to figure out that hamstring, And so I'm very, very optimistic on that one. I really want to see what he looks like full speed, and I think that's the excitement about that overshadows any sort of thought of him being injury prone for me, because there's not a lot of guys like that. And I think Chase Claypool was, he's probably the closest one recently to the same, size, height, speed comparison. And Chase Claypool turned into kind of a flake. Who knows what happened there? But, we see these really impressive guys. I guess DK Metcalf's another one, just physically impressive. You want to see those guys dominate. So, I want to see Christian Watson dominate. I want to see him live to that potential. So I'm going to stay on that optimistic train. But, all right, we got a couple of comments here. R says, how about early take on surprise guys who won't make the roster? Toure, O-line, Anthony Johnson. I got some thoughts about that. We can get into that. We might have to save that for another day. But I will say this, and one thing that I did want to get to later on, but Anthony Johnson Jr. is a guy that I'm not ready to let go of yet. I mean, he's only a rookie last year. I want to see this guy, and this is one of those where it's like, all right, he could be kind of a surprise in the offseason where he starts to rise up the depth chart where we're not seeing all of it, right? You're not seeing him in the film room, in the weight room. You got these closed practices and things like that. But all of a sudden, he's ahead of these guys that we think are supposed to be out there, and not saying that's what will happen, certainly could happen, but he's one that's on my radar. I think that's a fun topic, though. Tim, who's on your radar for guys that might not make it, that might be surprising?
Well, I mean, with the increase in competition, all those 11 draft picks they added, signing McKinney to play safety, like there's competition all over the roster. Like every position we talked about kickers and long snappers. There's competition there, like everywhere. So there may be a few guys who made this team last year and were on the roster all year that don't make it this year. So, I know in the comments, Samari Torre was mentioned. Yeah, I think he's got a really tough battle to make this team. And I think a lot of things would have to break right for Torre to make it. So he's not really a surprise to me. I know another person there, some of our people were mentioned here in the comments, is Royce Newman. Yeah, I mean, he's a guy the Packers seem to like a lot more than everyone else over the years. And I've been ready to move on from him for a while now, but there was kind of like that lack of depth there along the offensive line, especially, particularly before the draft, where it was like, who else do they have that can back up a guard? Now that they come off of a draft where they added 3 offensive linemen, with a couple of those guys having the versatility to play inside, it's going to be tough for him to make the team. He can't just coast in and expect to make it because he's been there the last few years. So, Newman could definitely be a candidate. I think you got to look, you bring up Anthony Johnson Jr., but they just added 3 draft picks and Xavier McKinney. So it's going to be a numbers battle in a way for Anthony Johnson Jr., where he's not only competing with those rookies, and they're unlikely to cut those rookies, he's going to be competing with guys across other positions. So he better be good on special teams, and he better show his value that you're going to keep an additional safety over, say, an additional linebacker or even additional, tight end, or like when it comes down to that numbers crunch. So yeah, I think there's a lot of guys, there's a lot of competition, and it's going to be a real fun battle in training camp, because and this will probably be something we can do at a later point, but we can break down the roster and say, who's making it, who's most likely. But I think there's a huge group of guys that are just in a cluster who are competing for starting jobs, but more so, competing for those depth positions to make the roster. And there's a ton of battles on both sides of the ball and special teams. So it starting in OTAs now, now that we're there, and it's going to go all the way through the preseason. So it'll be real interesting.
Yeah.
The increased competition with all the draft picks has really kind of, to me at least, changed the roster for them. And, it's increased the possibility for, a lot of different possibilities as far as who's going to make the depth chart, your second team guys, your third team guys.
Absolutely. And Clint, coming in with the question that is right on topic with us, where are the battles going to be fun to watch this year, since more positions are going to be up for grabs in most years? I think the easier question is to answer, what position has the least amount of battle going on, right? And for me, it's probably the D-line. There'll be plenty of competition, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it won't be competitive, but I just, they didn't bring in a lot, right? I don't think they didn't draft any D linemen.
No.
I was like, I didn't overlook that. So, you don't have a lot coming in. You have a very deep room. I think it's more of a battle for snaps, which could be a pretty impressive and competitive battle. But I think very likely you see pretty much the same room you saw last year. So other than that, shoot, it's all up for grabs, and it's not like, a guy like Quay Walker, his job is on the line, but his role is probably on the line. I think that's what makes it interesting, is like, what's the role going to be within the defense for some of these guys? And that, it's hard to predict, but you got to trust that the coaches are doing as they have said so far, and as we've all overanalyzed every bit of content we could get out of them, in that they're trying to maximize the players' strengths. So, I would watch for the battles across the board, man. It's going to be, you're going to have a heated battle for receiver 6 and 7, essentially. I don't know if they'll keep a 7. They'll probably keep a 6. You're going to have a heated battle in the running back room for everything behind Josh Jacobs. Tight end 3 might be a heated battle, right? You know, it doesn't really matter who tight end 1 and 2 are. We know who they are. Who cares who's 1 and who's 2? But yeah, so it's just across the board very interesting. The O-line, I mean, my goodness. The only one that I would say we know for sure is that Elgin Jenkins is playing left guard. Everything else could be shuffled up for the better. So yeah, I would say a lot of exciting battles to watch. It's hard to pinpoint one of them, and as we get closer to training camp, we'll probably pick apart some of these position battles. We'll probably also get some things here and there through OTAs and stuff that will give us ideas about who's where and what these battles look like. Quick shout out to sorry about that. White Knuckles, go Pack go. Thanks for joining us, White Knuckles. Appreciate you. But yeah, so a lot of interesting stuff to watch, but I think, overall, again, it's like this is a really good place to be as Packers fans, right? Like we're not dealing with dramatic stuff. There's not a ton of unpredictables like last season was a total fog of what to expect, and now it's like, all right, we can kind of be excited. Like hopefully the right guys take a step forward. Can y'all imagine, in one of the topics we're about to get to, and maybe just jump right on into that, breakout candidates. Can you imagine if Jordan Love takes a leap? What does that look like?
He can.
What does that look like if Jordan Love takes a leap in this season? You know what I mean? That would be fun. But I mean, we're getting ready to talk about this a little bit, and Anthony Johnson Jr. was one of mine, just because I'm not ready to let him go. He's only been in the league for one season. We really don't know what he is. But he's fascinating to me because just that, right? He made the roster last year. What you saw of him wasn't bad, but he's a giant mystery, So he's one that I think is a sneaky candidate to show up and maybe become, a competitor for a top spot in that safety room next to Xavier McKinney. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, this is a fascinating topic, and I know a lot of folks are talking about this right now. Who would be your top breakout candidate, Tim? I've probably got a couple more I could think of.
I mean, we could talk about most of the offense, the receivers, the tight ends. Like, there's a ton there. But starting defensively, Devontae Wyatt for me. I think this scheme sets up really well for what his talents are, and that's a 3 technique who's going to get into the backfield and up the field to push the pocket. He's not a guy that should be holding the line of scrimmage or 2-gapping or any of that stuff. He needs to penetrate and get in the backfield and make plays. And I think we've seen flashes of that. He's lacked consistency, which he has to find. And he's just got to finish his plays. He left 3 or 4 sacks out there for him last year that if he makes, I think the perception of him is a whole lot different right now, where he either missed a tackle or the quarterback broke free from him. If he can start making those plays, he'll be a breakout candidate. And I think this defense, the defense that wants, we're hearing they want to attack. They're not going to sit there in 2-gap. They're not going to hold the line of scrimmage with their D linemen. They want to shoot into the backfield and make plays into the backfield. That's what Devontae Wyatt is. He's that kind of, penetrating, disruptive D lineman, and we haven't seen it enough. And I think it's almost like part of the scheme. Like he's got to do his job, which is to hold the point of attack. And there's probably some hesitation, like, should I go or should I hold the point of attack, or can I get off the ball here and penetrate? And now this year, I don't think there's going to be much hesitation. I think he's going to be shooting those gaps and trying to wreck plays in the backfield. So I look for Wyatt. It's a big year for him, obviously, going into his 3rd year. But I think if he hits and he does what he's capable of, they're going to have a really fun and special pairing with Kenny Clark. And then, offensively, I mean, I think you could name all the receivers, all the tight ends. I'm just going to name the top 2 tight ends, Musgrave and Kraft. I think we saw flashes from those guys. I think Musgrave was starting to come on, and then he got hurt. Before that, he couldn't stay on his feet. I don't think they got him the ball enough. But we see physically, like, he's big and he can run. And now he's going to be, going into a 2nd year. healthy. Tucker Kraft, who, I mean, he came out of nowhere. The guy was really struggling. He wasn't playing a whole lot before Musgrave got hurt. And then as soon as Musgrave goes down, Kraft came in there and he was awesome for them the second half of the season down the stretch. I mean, blocking, receiving, yards after the catch. Like, I feel like he kind of almost already broke out in a way. But now, again, going into a second year, like, you can pick either one of them or both of them. I could see him. I think the sky's the limit for both of them. They're really good tight ends. The Packers found 2 of them, and it's just a matter of, like, can they stay healthy? And if they do, look out, because they got 2 guys at that position.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. It really is. This is actually kind of a tough conversation to limit because, and when you have the youngest roster in the league, there's obviously going to be a lot of opportunities for breakout candidates in the next season, and they'll probably be the youngest roster in the league again this season. One name, not that obviously people have forgotten about him, but he just doesn't come up much right now, which is, again, maybe a good thing. I want to see Lucas Van Ness, man. I want to see LVN break out, and I'm very excited about LVN, the athlete. I'm excited to see how, what does he do in a new scheme that is designed, to maximize his strengths. Where does he end up? What does he look like? But so some flashes that we saw last season, and I know that he wasn't even, the star of the rookie class, but man, there were some points where you're just like, oh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be a lot of fun. And the guy's nickname is Hercules. I get visions of Reggie White, throwing people with one arm, and I'm like, I want that. I want that guy back. So LVN is one I get excited about when I think about this next season. But yeah, I mean, pick your offensive skill position. Really, even some folks along the line. I'd like to see a couple of the rookies make an impact this year. We talked about them already. But yeah, what does the line shake out to be? And from there, who really, we've talked about it before, who kind of has that Elgton Jenkins kind of rise where it's like, oh, he's that dude. Okay. All right. Now we got another guy. You had a little bit of that from Rasheed Walker last season. You were starting to see it. We're all still not sure. Zach Tom has become that, right? We're certain Zach Tom is one of the best 5 on the line now. But now, it seems like center and right guard are up for grabs. I would love to be able to say, like, Sean Ryan should be a breakout candidate. I just can't.
I hope so.
I can't do it. I don't have enough to say that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think the O-line is going to be an interesting situation. That's not probably the group that comes to mind first when thinking about breakout candidates in next season, but there's several, so it's very exciting, and when you think about the receiver group, man, it's a lot of fun to think about it. Our over here is we're sharing wavelengths. Valentine and Malik Heath are my guys to make a leap. I'm with you.
Valentine's a great one.
Valentine, and I was a big Heath fan last preseason. I was a big Malik Heath fan. He's a bully, and I want more bully ball from our receivers because that just makes it a lot harder on DBs. Whatever they got to do, when you got a bully coming out there, he's making your job harder. So, yeah, I love the Malik Heath. I love Valentine. I think that it's going to be interesting to see how Hafley gets the most out of him as well. And then R had another one for us. Surprise could be Slayton. He's not a great scheme fit. I don't know that that's going to matter as much. You know what I mean? Like, I think these guys, they know what they have, and they know what these guys can do. And players are a lot less limited, I think, than they used to be in the past because they're so athletic. But yeah, I mean, Slayton's another one. He's big, man. He's a mountain. I want to see that dude break out. I would love to see that.
And I think R meant that he could be a surprise cut candidate, which I find that hard to believe.
Oops, I got that mixed up. You're right.
Yeah. But either way, like, Slayton played pretty damn good for them down the stretch last year, quietly. He was a good player second half of the season, and finally started finding that consistency that he had lacked early on. I like Slayton too. I mean, is he a good fit in the scheme? Time will tell. I mean, I guess body-wise, if you look at those San Francisco and New York Jets schemes, they don't have a ton of guys like him, but I don't think the Packers are going to have anybody like bigger than Slayton. He's their one, big true nose tackle who's not going to give you much pass rush. I think there's a spot for him in that scheme. I don't know why there wouldn't be. But I guess it's a possibility. I don't think he's absolutely guaranteed a roster spot, Slayton, but that would be, at least at this point, that would be a really big surprise if he's not making the initial 53 and playing a pretty decent amount for them.
Yeah. No, again, you got to look at these guys, look at their traits, their abilities. A guy with that size and his ability to move the way he does, I don't see them letting him go too quickly. I think that they're going to try as much as they can to make him fit in the scheme before sending him off. But yeah, a lot of interesting ones that there are to think about here. I mean, obviously, again, when you got the youngest roster in the league, you're going to have a lot of potential for breakout candidates. So, yeah, I mean, anybody else that comes to mind? I mean, I don't want to just sit here and go player by player, position by position, but I'm trying to think of anybody else that we're really not doing justice to. But no, it's exciting. Got to enjoy being in this place. And the other thing that we've got looming is the Jordan Love contract. So I guess that's the most dramatic thing that we've got going on right now. But that'll get done. We know that's going to get done.
Don't worry about the reports that are going to trickle out, especially the one last week from Schefter. That's coming directly from Jordan Love's agent to kind of just put it out there and a little bit of pressure on the Packers.
He knows how much of a clown Schefter is. That's right. Why he did that.
And Schefter's trying, even if it's not coming directly from the agents, Schefter's putting it out there to kind of suck up a little bit to the agents, to get the agents a better deal for their client so that Schefter can break the news and have an in with the agents. That's how it works. They filter the information through Schefter and he puts it out there. It's a negotiation. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen real quick. I mean, I hope it does, but just assume it's going to get done before the regular season starts and don't don't worry about it. When the Packers come out and say we're going to sign this guy, like there's no doubt about it, like Goody has said, it's going to get done. And it's just a matter of when. And it'll be before the regular season starts. Don't worry about it not being done yet. And if there's any more Schefter reports or anything else like that, don't pay any attention to it. Jordan Love's agent wants the best deal that he can get for Jordan, which is his job. So he's going to put it out there and put more pressure on the Packers. That's what happens. It's the dance that they go through in negotiations. It's going to get done. Don't worry about it.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. And let's not forget the last time that Schefter the Clown tried to report on a Packers quarterback. He couldn't have been more wrong. So exactly. He's just doing clown things. And, I know that not everybody's the biggest fan of Aaron Rodgers because, you got your personal feelings about his stuff, whatever. But he told Schefter, literally lose my number. Like, that's the level of credibility we're dealing with here.
I think
it's like,
yeah. And that, if you look back at what he was reporting then, that was directly coming from Rodgers' camp and Rodgers' agent. It wasn't coming from the Packers. And he ended up being wrong on it anyway because the Packers were never trading him.
Yeah. No, it was a total joke. So don't ever take anything that Schefter the Clown has to say except for any entertainment, Like that's really what it's for. It's for entertainment. But yeah, I mean that's the most drama we've got right now. Isn't that awesome? I mean, I love that. We after all these previous, speaking of Schefter the Clown and previous off seasons, of all this drama, we got, the Jordan Love contract, it'll happen. We still got some good conversation going on in the comments about breakout candidates. Wicks is coming up, Dontavian Wicks. I got to say, We probably haven't said enough about Wicks on here, but I'm such a Wicks fanboy on Twitter. I feel like I've already overdone my excitement for Dontavian Wicks, but he's probably at the top of my list of breakout candidates. I just didn't bring him up here because it almost feels too obvious.
Yeah, he feels very obvious. I love Wicks, and I'm right with you. Like, if he's there. And we had a discussion about wide receiver 1 before, but if he's their wide receiver 1 by the end of the season, it wouldn't surprise me at all. Like, I love him. I think he's going to be really good. So, yeah, I think he's an obvious breakout candidate.
Yeah, and watching him, there's so much Devontae Adams. And I know it's early, and Devontae's one of the best. Yeah, I get it. There's a lot of Devontae Adams in that kid. A lot of it. And it's fun. It's really fun that they actually might have found another Devontae Adams right after losing Devontae Adams. It's going to take some time. He might not emerge as receiver 1 right away, but that might be the guy 10 years from now that we're talking about, like, hey, this is the best receiver in the league. You can't let him go, that kind of thing. Wicks, he looks like sky's the limit on that one. Very, very excited about him. R makes a good observation here. Wicks kind of emerged as Reed faded some usage. Has something to do with it, but could be a good sign. Something that I would call out there is what we were talking about during the pre-draft process about receiver 4. So in the NFL, you've got a Z receiver, an X receiver, and an F receiver, and then receiver 4 is typically expected to be able to fill in each of those roles. So your Z receiver, X receiver, F receiver all probably have different skill sets, right? You got your Christian Watson, your Romeo Dobbs, and your Jaden Reed. Dontavian Wicks needs to be able to do all 3 of those jobs, and he can. And that's actually probably one of the reasons why he's getting some attention. He's getting some of that playtime even as a rookie because he's shown that he can do it. And that's not an everyday thing. For a guy who's number 4 on the roster to be able to essentially do everybody else's job, you've got to find a pretty exceptional individual, right? Typically receiver 4 is not your best receiver on the roster. So for him to have come in like that as a rookie, been able to take on that role and yes, step in when Reed, whoever, whether it was Reed, Watson, Dobbs, whoever he needed to step in for, he did a great job when he did. And his routes are, when you watch him run routes, it's hard not to see Devontae Adams. I can't say that enough. So I hope he develops the way that Adams did. To be the receiver 1 that Adams is takes a specific kind of mentality, not just physical abilities. But it's as promising as it gets right now. So, Clint comes out here, says, heard a quote from his offseason coach saying he's going to be definitely breakout. Yeah, there's some fun stuff coming from the Dontavian Wicks camp right now. So, I think if you're like an online Packers fan or you're like, close to the team, in the Green Bay area, you probably are aware. If you're more of a passive Packers fan, you probably haven't caught on to the Dontavian Wicks hype train yet. Check it out. So yeah, I wanted to give that the time that it deserved because we really haven't talked much Wicks on here. But man, so we go through our breakout candidates. We got Jordan Love contract, OTAs. There's just not much going on at this point in the offseason. We're getting to this point where it's like, all right, we got to get through just a drought of football, and we're gonna do it together. I think it's only like 6 more podcasts or something until training camp.
It's pretty quick, yeah.
Something like that.
We're about 2 months away.
Something more. It's coming up.
But yeah, it's going to be here before you know it. And we'll start getting some, OTA reports and then some mini camp reports and that kind of stuff. So that'll give us something.
Absolutely.
There's always stuff to talk about, even though thankfully there's no drama, but we always get stuff to talk about.
There's always stuff to talk about. We're Packers fans. We love talking about the Pack. But yeah, so I am very grateful for how quiet it is right now. Again,
Yes.
thinking back just a few years ago, just living on every Rodgers rumor, guy's in a cave, just he's off in the jungle. You just never know what's going to happen. And we get to relax and see that our players are off working out together and hanging out together, and they like each other. And, one of these days we're going to get a Jordan Love contract extension, and we're going to get to be excited about that. So I love it. I'm soaking this in right now, Packers fans. Y'all should be too, because it doesn't come around like this very often, right? You got to remind yourself you could be a Bears fan, Ugh. The Bears still suck. Hey, but they're really excited that Caleb Williams can complete a pass in shorts. So,
well, it's an improvement over every other quarterback they've had. So, good for him.
So we might have to have like this little sub segment of what's going on in Bears camp. But the Bears still suck. That's what's going on in Bears camp. That's what we know. But it'll make for a fun season to see how Caleb Williams progresses as he runs for his life, because they still haven't done anything about the offensive line. I'm glad. Let's keep this streak alive. Another sweep for the Bears sounds nice to me. Clint coming in says definitely seems calmer without Rodgers. It is calmer without Rodgers, no doubt about that. And again, this is a Packers podcast. Rodgers is not a Packers quarterback anymore, so we don't have to talk about him. But that's all we have for this episode. So we really appreciate y'all for hanging out with us this week on the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. Check us out on YouTube, Twix, Twitter X, Facebook, Instagram. Spike that like button for us if y'all enjoyed the episode, and please subscribe to the Packers Talk YouTube channel. We really appreciate y'all jumping in. Everybody in the comments section, thank you guys for hanging out with us. And we will see y'all next week, Packers fans. Go, Pack, go!